My name is Natalie Kwan. I'm 32 years old, and I need to tell you about the house that changed everything. Not because I lost it, but because of what I did before anyone realized I was even in the race. There is this old Georgian manor on Willowbrook Lane that I have been in love with since I was 8 years old. I grew up in the house 3 streets away, and every single afternoon I would ride my bicycle past its ivy-covered stone walls and its enormous arched windows, just imagining what it would feel like to one day call it mine. It wasn't just a building to me, it was a feeling. It was the version of my life I had been quietly building toward for over 2 decades. When the for sale sign finally appeared last spring, I didn't scream or cry or call anyone. I just sat in my car at the end of that driveway for a long time, and I said to myself, this is it. This is finally it. What I didn't expect was to pull up one Tuesday evening and see my brother Daniel's truck parked in front of the gate, and then my mother's silver sedan right behind it, and then my cousin Priya's car on the curb. My stomach dropped before my brain even caught up. I had told them about this house. Of course I had. I had been talking about it for months, ever since the listing went live. I had shared the photos at dinner, described the original crown molding, gushed about the walled garden out back. I had trusted them with something that mattered deeply to me, the way you only do with people you think are safe. And standing there in that driveway, watching the lights flicker on inside those beautiful arched windows, I understood exactly what had happened. My brother called from the front steps before I could even get out of my car. "Surprise," he said, spreading his arms wide like he was unveiling something magnificent. We wanted to do something incredible for the family. My mother was behind him, arms crossed, wearing that particular expression she reserves for moments when she believes she has won something. "We heard you were looking into putting in an offer," she said, almost casually. "But honestly, Natalie, a house this size is far too much for one woman living alone. We thought it made more sense for the whole family." Priya added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Besides, you know how you are. You overthink everything. We saved you from yourself." I walked through the house slowly. I touched the original wood paneling in the hallway. I looked up at the plasterwork ceiling roses in the sitting room. I stood at the kitchen window and stared out at the garden I had dreamed about for 24 years. And I kept my face completely, perfectly still. What they did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had seen this coming 3 weeks earlier. I had spotted Daniel and my mother touring the house with an estate agent on a Thursday afternoon when they thought I was at work. I recognized his truck from the end of the lane, and something cold and certain moved through me. I knew exactly what it meant. This was what my family did. It had always been what my family did. Every promotion I earned became a conversation about someone else's success. Every goal I shared became a quiet competition they never admitted they were entering. I had learned this about them slowly, painfully, over many years, and this time I decided I would not be caught off guard. That same evening, I called my solicitor, and I made a different offer. On Ashford Hall, the estate sitting directly adjacent to the Georgian manor on Willowbrook Lane. Larger, older, more architecturally significant in every possible way. It had been sitting just slightly longer on the market, priced higher, requiring more vision than most buyers were willing to bring to it. But I had been quietly researching it as a secondary option for weeks, and the moment I understood what my family was planning, I knew it was no longer secondary at all. I exchanged contracts on Ashford Hall 11 days before my family completed on the Georgian manor. Renovations were already underway by the time they handed me that surprise. So I smiled at my brother, and I said, "It really is beautiful. You must be so pleased." "The market was brutal," my mother said, clearly waiting for me to ask how they had managed it. "But some of us know how to be decisive when it counts." My father appeared from the hallway and added almost offhandedly, "Maybe if you spent less time in libraries and more time in the real world, you'd understand how these things work." He has never forgiven me for doing a master's degree instead of joining the family business. He calls my career in architectural conservation a hobby with a salary. What he has never understood is that my so-called hobby had been funding a very deliberate financial life for almost a decade. "It's truly lovely," I said, moving toward the door. "I should get going, though. I have contractors to meet." "Contractors?" Priya repeated. "Are you finally renovating that flat?" I paused in the doorway and let myself smile, just once, just slightly. "Something like that. We'll be seeing a lot of each other soon, actually. It turns out we're going to be neighbors." I left them standing in the hallway of the house they bought to diminish me, and I walked back to my car and I drove around the corner to Ashford Hall, where the project manager was waiting to walk me through the timeline for the East Wing restoration. 2 weeks later, the removal lorries came. I was in the garden when I heard Priya's voice carry across the low stone wall separating our properties. Daniel, come here. Come look at this." The furniture alone told enough of the story. Antique pieces I had been collecting for years, each one chosen with the same care I brought to everything I did quietly and privately. The architectural salvage items I had been sourcing for months: original Victorian fireplaces, reclaimed oak flooring, hand-thrown ceramic tiles, a pair of restored wrought iron gates for the entrance that made the Georgian Manor's newer fixtures look like they came from a catalog. By the time my mother arrived, her car a little too fast around the corner, I was standing at the top of the stone steps directing the placement of a 19th century writing desk I had found at auction the previous autumn. "Natalie." Her voice was strange, tight. "What exactly is going on?" "I'm moving in," I said pleasantly. "Tea? I've already unpacked the kettle." I gave them a tour. I watched their faces in the library, with its original gallery railing and the rolling ladder I had had restored. I watched my brother go very quiet in the orangery, where the glass had been replaced and the old heating system updated, and where my collection of botanical prints lined the walls in matching frames. I watched my mother step into the main reception room and look up at the restored ceiling, the original cornicing cleaned and repaired, the proportions of the room making the equivalent space in the Georgian manor suddenly feel like a cottage. "There's also a coach house," I mentioned, "which I'm converting into a studio space, and the walled kitchen garden has already been cleared and planted." No one said anything for quite a long moment. My brother was the one who finally spoke. "You planned this." "I bought a house," I said. "You turned it into a competition. I just declined to lose one I hadn't agreed to enter." The text came that evening in a cascade, Daniel asking if we could talk, my mother suggesting a family dinner, Priya, remarkably, sending 3 separate messages asking whether I had used a particular interior designer and whether I might share their contact. I read them all and answered none of them that night. What followed over the next several months was something I hadn't entirely anticipated, though perhaps I should have. My family, faced daily with the evidence of a life they had profoundly underestimated, began to recalibrate. Slowly and awkwardly, the way people do when they have been wrong for a very long time and can't quite bring themselves to say so directly. I hosted Christmas at Ashford Hall. The whole family came, aunts and cousins and the various partners and children who fill out the edges of our gatherings. The dining room seated everyone without effort. The children ran between the rooms and out into the garden, and there was music, and there was food I had spent 3 days preparing, and there was a fire in every hearth, and the house held all of it effortlessly, the way a house that was built to last 300 years tends to do. My aunt found me in the kitchen late in the evening, both of us making a second pot of tea while the others settled into post-dinner conversation in the sitting room. "You're very happy here," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I am," I told her. "Your mother worries you're lonely." I thought about the manuscript I was writing, the research project that had consumed me in the best possible way, the colleagues who had visited, the neighbors along the lane who had become genuine friends, the garden that was already exceeding everything I had imagined. "I'm not lonely," I said. "I'm just living exactly the life I actually want, rather than the one other people decided I should want." She nodded slowly. I think that frightens her more than the house does. My father came to see me in February, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, appearing at my gate unannounced in the manner of someone who hasn't yet decided what he wants to say. I brought him inside and made coffee and waited. "The Georgian is costing more than we budgeted," he said eventually. "Old houses always do." "Yes," I agreed. He looked around the room we were sitting in. "Yours seems well in hand." "I've been planning it for a long time." A long pause. "I didn't realize you were doing so well." I looked at my father, a man who had spent 30 years measuring everything by a set of standards I had never quite fit, who had called my education a distraction and my career a detour and my choices a series of unnecessary complications. And I found, sitting across from him in the house I had built my life toward, that I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Not anymore. "I know," I said simply, and I poured him more coffee and we talked about the garden, and it was, in its quiet way, the most honest conversation we had ever had. They didn't sell the Georgian manor. Their pride wouldn't allow it, and honestly, the house is beautiful, and on a good day, I think they genuinely love it. What changed was subtler than that. The dynamic that had always made family feel like an obstacle course began, slowly to ease. Not because anyone made a grand declaration or admitted they had been wrong, but because it is very difficult to maintain the fiction that someone is less than you when you are standing in the rooms of their life. And the evidence disagrees with you at every turn. I still see them over the wall sometimes. My brother in the garden on weekends, my mother at her kitchen window in the mornings, and sometimes I think that proximity, not in spite of everything, but because of it, has done more for our family than years of polite distance ever managed. They thought they were teaching me something about my place in the world. What they taught me instead was to stop waiting for permission to occupy the space I had already earned. Ashford Hall is mine. The garden is coming into itself. The coach house studio is nearly finished. And every morning I wake up in the house I chose, in the life I built, and I think, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not because I won anything, but because I finally stopped letting other people define what winning was supposed to look like.